One of the central themes of Montclair's teacher education program is the fostering of critical thinking. What does critical thinking mean to you? Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. So to me, critical thinking is when I'm aiming to foster critical thinking in students, I'm aiming to be able to get them to engage with the material at a deeper level than just face value, to be able to engage at a deeper level than just reciting facts, or in the music classroom than just being able to play a scale. I want students to be able to take information they have from different sources and connect them in meaningful ways. And I want them to be able to share that with their peers. And overall just have a more engaged way of learning than just learning facts that you can recite off of a flashcard.
And can you give me a practical example, perhaps, that would provide evidence of the way in which you understand critical thinking?
Sure. So for example, in the music classroom, which is what we're talking about, I would think if I was in a large ensemble teaching a piece, I would challenge students to give me, it's a really simple example, but to give me adjectives that they use to describe the music, and challenge them to describe the music in ways more complicated than sad or happy or fast or slow, but to use the musical information they have and the musical knowledge we've been giving them to make their own opinions about how the piece should be performed.
Good, thanks. Jack, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, and I think like a component to all that is being able to sort your sources of information too, and really like looking at the background of the things that you're doing, and encouraging your students to ask like why, like we're doing this, but why? And I think that's a big part of like critical thinking in classrooms too.
Okay. Anybody else want to add anything?
I think critical thinking is incredibly important because you need it to solve problems. And in life, we always encounter obstacles and situations that we need to navigate through. And I think in the music classroom, we could start at least building those problem solving skills, because even when we're learning an instrument or a piece, we encounter obstacles with those too. And if we can learn how to navigate to learn a tiny little passage, then we could take baby steps forward to being able to solve bigger problems that we could apply to the real world.
Great. Anything else to add? Eliza, anything? No? She's good. Okay. All right. That's a pretty standard run-of-the-mill sort of type of teacher education question. Here's another one that you could possibly encounter. Okay. So sometimes there is a tension or conflict between people from different ethnic or cultural groups in schools. What do you think schools could or should do to address this? Let me read that one again, because there's a lot in that question. Sometimes there is tension or conflict between people from different ethnic or cultural groups in schools. What do you think schools could or should do to address this? Go ahead, Jack.
I think honestly, I think there just needs to be more representation of different groups in meaningful and authentic ways. And what I mean by that is like bringing in people from different backgrounds, like maybe parents, and just showing parts of their culture to classrooms, and that way people can get engaged and they can be like, oh, this is pretty cool, and that way you get like an authentic experience with a different culture instead of just, you know, telling them like, hey, stop that.
Go ahead, Ryan. Sure.
So something that comes to mind is this kind of quote that as people, we only can care about what we understand, and we only understand what we are taught. And I think that there's an opportunity in schools to expose students to a lot of different cultures and ethnicities. And if they've never been exposed to them, it's already going to be hard for them to understand them and to empathize and to relate. So I think, like Jack said, bringing in people of different kinds of groups to teach each other about what they know and maybe what they don't know is a really good opportunity to get those students to really care in an authentic way about those different groups.
What do you think, Jesse? Have anything to add?
I was mainly I was thinking the same topic, like just going off of my own experience. We did have a lot of good ways we were taught about cultures in my school, but nothing really super in depth. Like we'd have the culture festival once a year and everyone would do that sort of thing, but you didn't really learn about any specific culture. So you'd get to see like a broad overview maybe of really generalized aspects of it, but nothing super in depth so you truly understand what those people, what their culture is about. And if you never really get that, there could be things that you just don't understand and then you can't really agree with, or you get into disagreements like that.
So what do you think are some potential proactive ways to bridge some of those misunderstandings?
Well, what Ryan and Jack said was really good, bringing in outside sources to talk about the cultures and explore them much more in depth than having a 5-minute show during lunch about, hey, this is my culture, okay, next. It should definitely be much more in depth and discuss or talk about their culture.
Okay. Anything else to add? Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so I think part of this, when we're talking about wanting people to be able to share their unique cultures and identities, and I think part of that is the school has the responsibility to create a space where people feel encouraged and able to share that about themselves, because that's not always an easy thing to do. And I think if you're in a school that is predominantly one group, if you're in the minority, it can be very hard to share that part of yourself. And I think the school can do work to encourage people to be able to share.
Good. Amanda, you look like you want to say something, but I can't quite read your Zoom language.
You're right.
Okay.
So going off of Ryan said, based off of my personal experiences, the music classroom has the ability to become a home for students. A place where when the band room is locked, to feel like you're locked out of your house, and everyone in the room with you is, a member of your family. And having that wonderful environment allows students to be comfortable and be vulnerable and share who they are, because by celebrating differences and accepting them is a great way not to prevent conflicts, but to create a community that can help build a better tomorrow in the future.
Great. And so in what ways can, say, a choir classroom or a general music classroom or a music technology classroom or a band classroom create authentic experiences? Go ahead, Jack.
Well, kind of tying everything together here, it's like, well, first of all, as somebody who's running that classroom, it's your responsibility to pick a diverse selection of music from different cultures and everything. And when you're working on that music, it would be awesome to bring in people who are from that culture. That way they can really give you all the insights that you might not be able to get otherwise. That'd be really fun too.
Sure. So one of the things to think about in connection to that, of course, is that as a music teacher, obviously you cannot possibly know all the world and all of its music. Not authentically anyway. And that's a scary word to use, so I'm putting it in air quotes, authentically, right? But you may be able to access people who do, whether through music technology or through Zoom meetings or an in-person meeting if we ever get over the coronavirus. There are people in the community for whom this music is a part of their everyday world. And so to bring them in, to have them share their experiences with this music, and then to help your students celebrate that music in as authentic a way as you possibly can, given your own experiences. And so this is why it's really imperative for music teachers to constantly be seeking professional development. So what kinds of music do you come equipped with as a teacher? If it's one or two kinds of music, again, that's great if you're expert at both of them, but then what are you doing throughout your career to add on, right? So it's never an ending process, and your education doesn't stop because you get a degree in music education. It's sort of just the beginning. And so while you may not be able to address the gap right now in your first job, maybe in 2 years, in 5 years, you'll have more equipment readily available that you're able to pull from. And if and when you can, as Jack said, bring people in, have them be your resources and your guide. Students to see you as a learner, just like they're learners, and you're sitting alongside of them experiencing this for the first time too. That's a really valuable lesson for students to see as well, is that you don't know everything. You can't possibly know everything, but your openness to learning is just as valuable a lesson as you teaching them something yourself. So does that sort of make sense to you? Yes, and that's why you should join the popular. You're a very good salesperson, very good salesperson. Did you want to say something, Amanda?
Yeah, I did. That's why I'm muted. Oh,
I'm so good at reading your Zoom language. She like leans into the leans.
I'm like, I'm ready to click on mute. But, speaking of popular music, I was just talking about this in class with because I'm taking popular music techniques with Dr. Power, blah blah blah. So we were talking about how that popular music is a very large umbrella that includes a lot of music, and what's important when you're including popular music is that it's also the students' music. And when you have a diverse classroom, allowing them to share the music that they're interested, that they are learning every day, and including that in the repertoire in the music classroom, that could be incredibly powerful.
And that's why you should know. There it is. Great. No, very, very good. Good. Okay, let me ask you a music specific question. So those were teacher education sort of framed. And those are the kinds of questions that likely the faculty member from the College of Education will ask you. And likely there will be a question similar to that, which will start the interview process off. And then Dr. DiLorenzo and I will sort of field more questions that are music specific. So I'm going to ask you a couple of those. So, okay, here's one. This is imagining you in the classroom already. So let's put you as the music teacher. So put on a music teacher hat for this question. You and your students created a hip hop version of the opera Carmen. However, after finding out that you've been working on this, your principal states that he does not want this performed on the school stage because he says hip hop promotes misogyny and violence. Do. So there's lots of issues in there. So I will read that question again. Okay. You and your students created a hip hop of the opera Carmen. However, after finding out that you've been working on this, your principal states that he does not want this performed on the school stage because he says hip hop promotes misogyny and violence. What do you do? Go ahead, Eliza.
Hi. I feel like that there should be, well, obviously, like it's an art should be expressed, and there's maybe like there should be some I don't know, like I think it's just find a alternative. I think I don't know how to answer this. This is really
It's a hard question. I think Jack and then Ryan. Go ahead.
I think honestly, I think like if you decided, or hypothetically, if I decided that this was the best way to adapt this music for my students, then it probably really, this style of music really means a lot to them. So I would have a conversation with the principal and be like, this type of music is really more than what you're seeing it as, and I would invite them to maybe like come to like a rehearsal or something and like just listen to it and like see what this music means to them. And like, obviously we could be very explicit and be like, look, there's no misogyny or anything in these lyrics or anything. And just really give them the experience of like how much this actually means to the students.
Okay, good. Ryan?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Jack. I think bringing in an administrator into the music classroom and showing them what active music making is like is really powerful, because it seems in this scenario, and it's not an uncommon one, the principal only knows about hip hop what he's seen online and what he's read. And bringing him into showing him what the actual music making means to the students and how it creates students who want to learn, who want to be engaged, is much more powerful. And in the same note, if I was talking to the principal, I would encourage him to not consider a genre of music based on only, like, I would say, a small subset of it, and those kind of, I would encourage him to not equate connotations with the meaning of the entire genre, because I would say that Western classical music has a lot of connotations of racism and being a male dominated field, but it's still a really powerful genre that we can make meaningful engagement from.
No, that's a really powerful and important point. I mean, if we're talking about opera, almost every opera that's been written in the canon is misogynistic. So there's that. I mean, the original Carmen is misogynistic. So there's, so there's that. I mean, yes. So your point is well taken in terms of to paint an entire kind of music with one color is as problematic as saying you can say X, Y, and Z about particular kinds of people. Right? You would never do that, because here I see how many different faces, 9 different faces in front of me. You're all unique and you're all different. And to sort of say, as a whole, you guys are X, would be diminishing who each one of you is. The same goes true for music. So 2 very, very good points. Anything else? Is there perhaps a way to, oh, I don't know, think through this a little bit more proactively? So the question assumes that you and your students have already created this thing and the principal finds out somehow. So is there a way to think about this before that happened? Like, what could you have done to preempt, say, something like this? Go ahead, Ryan.
So I think that involving the principal or the administration in at the very start of it, at every level of the music making, is important, because I can understand that for an administrator who has these beliefs, however misguided they are, to be confronted with a finished product you had know nothing about, you didn't have the opportunity to learn what it's actually about. You're only seeing a final product. And if they're there from the beginning and you tell them this is what we're planning to do, this is why it means something to the students, and this is why it's not problematic, they're much more likely to be willing to learn about it, I think.
Good. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I think like very much along the same lines. I guess like maybe just having like a really open relationship with your administrators just from the beginning. Like that's basically what you're saying, but I think like yeah, no, that's basically what he's saying. But you know, yeah, I think that's really important.
Well, like it would be, it's sort of odd, because the question that comes to my mind is, okay, if you're creating something that's going to be put on the school stage and it's already done, it's incomplete, where is the assistant principal? Like, where is his or her relationship here? They must have known that this was like happening, kind of thing. And so there's got to be some kind of budget, or at least allotment of time, or a schedule, or something in which somebody had to okay something. So for it to get this far seems a little surreal. Is it possible? Yes, there are plenty of schools where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So for sure it is possible, but perhaps as a music teacher to think proactively so that things like this wouldn't come across your desk, where all of a sudden you're being charged with misogyny. What? No, no, that's not what we're doing here, right? Like an English teacher, their books are all on a list of accepted, like everybody knows that the books that are in the library have been chosen by the school, end of story. When you're creating new things though, some people could be a little taken aback by certain things. And so your points about educating people are really, really crucial and important. But also considering what could be done so that you wouldn't be put into that box to begin with. I'm sorry, Amanda, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to go off of what Jack and Ryan said, to have that open relationship with administrators. But the one thing I'd add is in the event that the school is unorganized and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, etc., always include them in the process of what is going on. Because what happens is that not everyone likes every genre of music, and they're not going to agree with everything. Like 7 billion people in the world are not going to agree that pink is the best color, like just as an example. So what I suggest is by having them part of the process, seeing how hard these kids are working and creating this wonderful final product. This means a lot to these students. Don't let them down based on your own assumptions of a musical genre that you don't know enough of. So that's
right. The other thing that you can do to sort of be very proactive and a little bit slick and sly and political, and that's never a bad thing, is when you know that you're going to be doing something, whatever it is, whether it's challenging for some people or not, is invite particular members of your administration to play a small part in whatever it is that you're doing. And so you could say to your principal, we're going to be putting on a version of Carmen. We were wondering if you wouldn't mind playing one of the townspeople. And maybe he or she will say, yes, I'd be honored to participate in your, version of Carmen, sure. And then find out that he or she becomes a hip hop mogul and and is in it already and is experiencing it with the kids. And so that's a kind of, it's a little slick, it's a little sly, it's a little, savvy but political move, so that sometimes the right people can see what they need to see in the right kinds of ways. So that's just another way about sort of being proactive so that you don't have to encounter something like that. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
And I think maybe part of like being really proactive like that too is doing this is something that my high school kind of does now. They have like a social media presence where, they'll be like sharing videos of like the progress that they're doing, kind of like updating like the community and everybody around, like, hey, like, look at what we're doing. So like, if you've been posting videos of like, hey, like, look at this really cool thing we've been making, you can be like, oh, well, like, you might not like it, but like, look at all of these people that do. That way you have like a built-in, like, yeah, like, argue with like my 1,000 followers. Like,
yes, you will make a lot of people angry if you do not allow us to put on this production. Nice. Okay, that is certainly a way to go about that for sure. All right, let me ask you another. Okay, so this is another question. It's not as perhaps politically minded, but maybe it is. There's a group of 5 at-risk students who come to you to start an after-school percussion ensemble. Your principal says we have no money to buy any percussion equipment when all your school owns is 1 snare drum and 1 bass drum. What do you do?
Oh my gosh, I remember a similar story from this class that I took called Foundations of Music.
Yeah, there was this crazy professor who looks like a Muppet who was busy talking about.
And and then it inspires this. The answer is when I was hearing the story, the music teacher invited the principal into the class, the percussion ensemble, seeing the utilizing the equipment that they had, plus buckets and more, just of what was available to them. And being a part of that music making was very inspiring. And the principal said, yeah, like this means a lot to the students, and they should have equipment that works for them and help them achieve their musical goals.
Good. Eliza?
Going off of what Amanda says, I think it's very important to understand that like these instruments provide a distraction for kids, especially like at risk kids, because like you don't know like what they're going through in life. I think it's just they have a rough home life or something, dealing with financial situations. I think it's like a good escape and distraction for them. I was thinking like, if they had like didn't have as much like percussion equipment, like maybe like improvise. Like I remember in Foundations of Music Education, you taught us that how you can improvise with different sounds and different like objects around the house or classroom, and it's still like it provides that sample of escape. That's what I feel, and I feel like that will provide a lot of comfort, even if you bring the and also like bringing in the administrator too will also like, and showing them like you can still like this provides a great distraction for these kids and they really want to be here. So it's in order to provide that comfort, it bringing him in and then showing him why they do it, it's very important, and then he'll learn off of that and he'll provide more comfort for the students, and then you know that you're doing a great job in terms of helping your students and making that music.
Good. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
So this is just what came to mind when you said this question. And obviously, I remember you telling this story of using found percussion, which I think is actually something that is amazing about percussion, is you don't really need necessarily all the expensive instruments. You can do a lot with body percussion and found percussion. But I think there's this belief in administration and Board of Eds that musical equipment and instruments is something you buy when the group is good enough to win a festival or the group is good enough to get social media attention. And I think we need to kind of educate that our goal isn't necessarily to win the state festival. If that happens, it's great, and I'm so happy. But our goal is active music making and making lovers of music and music learning, and music equipment and instruments is taking one less obstacle away to getting kids actively engaged.
For sure. It's a sort of a double-edged sword, the percussion example, because when you are being really creative with found percussion or going into a junkyard and grabbing things and making percussion instruments out of them, obviously that's what found percussion is. It's one way to create found percussion. While it's very creative and it's really provocative, and it does afford sometimes the same sets of skills that you would be teaching if you were using traditional percussion equipment, what it teaches the students is the lesson that they are not valuable enough to be given real instruments. And so it's okay for them to just go into the junkyard and to grab a tire or to grab, some piece of metal and to take sticks and hit it, kind of thing. And it also teaches the administration that same lesson, that you don't need these other things. Like you can just, use your body to make percussion instruments. You don't need this other stuff. And so it's great when kids do engage in that kind of music making, because the realization that anything can be a musical instrument is so richly rewarding. It's beyond belief. But just like every English student has a textbook, every music student should be afforded a musical instrument in order to make music. And so if a school is saying that students can take band, then what does that mean if you don't actually provide the instruments for which that can happen? Like you can take English, but we're not providing you any books. what? No, it would never work like that. So yes, we want our students to be really creative, and we want to do fan percussion. We want to do body percussion. We want to do all kinds of vocalizations and all sorts of things that don't cost anything. But we run the risk then of not being financially supported in the ways that are meaningful or potentially meaningful for students' musical growth. So just sort of, you know, be mindful of both of those sides, because they're both unfortunately there, and it makes that question even that much more challenging to think through. Anything else to add about meeting the needs of at-risk students? At risk. I don't label them that. Administrations label them that. Yes, go ahead, Melanie.
What does at-risk mean?
Okay. So does anybody want to answer that for me so I don't have to? What is an at-risk student? Go ahead, Eliza.
Like, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but like from personal experiences with people that I've known, like people that have come from unstable home lives or something, and have had poor financial situations, and just maybe in danger of, it's something like outside of school, and I think it's just something that where they're at risk of possibly failing or not do correct. I don't know if I'm on the right track, but
So for sure, the last point that you made is the deciding factor is when administrations see kids who are failing and not showing up to school, they get labeled as at risk. In other words, that they will not graduate. Now, the reasons for that, it's not, we don't really get into that. That's not, the label doesn't come from perhaps the causes for the failing or the truancy or getting arrested on school property, like things like that. The reasons for that don't weigh into it, but the fact that students are failing, that they aren't showing up, that they are hanging out in the hallway, that they are getting detention, that they are getting suspended, all of those things combined create this label that administrators place on students for them being at risk. Does that help, Melanie?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So what else might we think about in terms of those particular students in relation to them coming to you as a music teacher to start an after-school percussion ensemble? Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Well, I mean, like very clearly, you could say to your administrators, like, hey, like they want to be involved. Like these are people that are at risk and they want to be involved in something. Like, why shouldn't we be giving them the equipment that they need to be doing this? Like, this is literally what you want. They're being involved. Like, help us.
Go ahead, Ryan. Sure.
So I think when you have a situation where these at-risk kids are coming to you to start something, speaks very powerfully about the environment you've managed to create in your classroom where they feel comfortable enough to do that and that they feel motivated to do that. And I think if you can work to create that environment by encouraging them to, in the music classroom, bring in their own musical identities or do what motivates them, and then translate that maybe down the road into motivations towards other things they may not like as much. But creating that environment comes first and foremost.
For sure, for sure. And now the other thing to sort of, I guess, think through in terms of the relationship between at-risk students and schooling is if they're being truant, if they are getting detention, if they are not turning in any work for any of their classes, but yet they're coming to you as a music teacher because they want to be engaged in this way, chances are there's something going on where they, once they are engaged in some way, they could potentially become more engaged in other ways. And so this would be a crucial step towards rectifying the issue to begin with, because, okay, so they're coming to after school percussion ensemble. maybe they might decide to come to in-school band ensemble. And maybe once they do in-school band ensemble, maybe they'll go to gym once in a while. So maybe the more that you can get them feeling like they belong in a place, the more they will feel like they belong, and then the more they will belong. So there's a sort of a crucial juncture there that the principal may or may not be really cognizant of, that this could be the thing that turns this whole situation around for these particular kids. Now, it may not, and it may totally not work, but it might. And so that should be sort of weighed in the decision making of that scenario. Okay, I will ask you one more music question. All right. A group of students harshly remark, classical music is for old, rich, white folks with nothing to do better than spend $150 for tickets. I'm sick of this. What do you do? Go ahead, Ryan.
So I think if students have reached that point where they're so dissociated with what's happening in the classroom, and I don't mean, I think you need to take a step back and think, they clearly aren't wanting to be engaged in active music making right now. And whether that's because of something happening outside of school, whether that's because of their biases towards this music, or whether it's because of how I'm teaching this class, I need to find a way to get them actively engaged. And that can, if I take a step back and try to find something they would want to be actively engaged in, and not that like classical is always the end goal, but if they're having trouble engaging with that, I would aim to find what music they do like, try to find ensembles they could participate in that would motivate them, and then down the road show them, hey, you know that music you like, it's really not that different than what we're doing in classical music, and try to build that bridge.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, going off, sorry, okay, so going off of what Ryan said, when students make that remark, it means it could mean that classical music isn't relatable to them, and they don't accept that form of music compared to the form of music or genres that they personally listen to. So including other types of music in the classroom and trying a different repertoire will say, well, you can accept X, Y, and Z. Well, classical music is another genre. It's just another panel on the umbrella of music that you can learn. And then their whole perspective could change towards, yeah, I may not like to listen or play classical music, but I know it exists and other people accept it, and therefore I can. And if other people like it, then that's okay.
Yep. Jack?
It also, that comment might lead to a really interesting conversation where you could be like, yeah, like that's the perception of it, but like how did we get there? Like what about this has led you to think about that? And then like you could actually talk about the history, maybe, you know, depending on what you're supposed to be doing. But like but like that actually could be a really interesting conversation to have with them, and really talk about like the social context of the music, you know. Might be pretty valuable.
Good. Yeah, Ryan?
Just a quick thing to add on to what we've been saying so far is I think that students having that feeling, I think students need to love making music before they can love making classical music. And I think too often we just jump into, well, classical music is music, so if we do classical music, they'll love music. And that's often, most of the time, not true. We have to discuss what music is, do really engaging, active work with percussion and singing before we say, you love making music, let's try making this kind of music.
Good. Anything else? Yeah, good.
Totally going off of that. I think like most of the time there's this kind of um supremacy with classical music where it's like this is the end goal. You know, like we might do this other stuff, like you might, yeah, like we have a jazz band that you could do sometimes or something or whatever, but like this is the real music. Like I think like we need to do a better job as like music teachers of really deconstructing that and just being like, well, it's all music, it's just different genres and it's just whatever you like. So preemptively, if you start doing that from the beginning, you're going to be in a better shape and people won't ask questions like that. Well, maybe they will, but yeah.
I can't tell, Amanda, are you going towards your camera there because you want to say something or no? Yes?
No, I was just agreeing with what Jack said. And
Okay.
just going, yeah.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. I mean, there is something about if a group of students came to you as a teacher and collectively said this, I think Ryan, you said this, like, if we're already at that point, like what had to have happened for students to erupt in that kind of a way? And so I think that's probably where the problem started to begin with. You know, if it was just a one-time kind of thing, somebody was in a bad mood and didn't really want to be singing, you know, "Sheep May Safely Graze" by Bach, you know, and just said it flippantly, that's one thing. But if a whole group of students comes to you and says, you know, we've got a problem with this and here's why, then something had to have been leading up to it. It wouldn't just spontaneously happen in that kind of a way. So, so point well taken. How are we doing on time?
It's 3:52.
And what does that mean for all of you? Because I can ask you questions all day. I don't know if you want that. Huh?
So I'm personally having a good time, so we could keep. This is helpful.
This is helpful. All right, I will ask you one more. Okay. Okay. This is fairly straightforward. You receive the instrument preference surveys, and out of 40 incoming fourth graders, 25 girls want to play the flute, 10 boys want to play the drums, 1 girl wants to play the trombone, and 4 boys want to play the saxophone. What do you do?
My actual music teacher actually did this in high school to the middle school that she also worked at. So she would do like a list where instead of just picking your main instrument that you want to play, you pick the top 3, and then she would do her best to let you play your number 1 instrument, and then like if she wasn't able to make that happen, then she would go to your like number 2 or number 3.
Okay, so top 3 choices rather than top 1 choice. Good. Go ahead, Jack. Yeah.
I think the thing that I thought of immediately is like, whoa, how are you gonna get that many flutes? Like that's gonna be like a logistical problem. But like in the case that like, let's say you do, like let's just say that like you do have all that stuff. I don't know, like arrange some stuff. Like I think that might be like strange, but like maybe doing work in like small groups and just arranging stuff with like weird instrumentation might be like a fun thing to do, even though it, you know, it might not sound incredible. It would be like everybody's playing the thing that they want to. So if you have the equipment, that would be cool, but you probably don't have that many flutes.
Go ahead, Ryan.
So I kind of have 2 points, but I remember, I think you talked about in foundations how you had a whole lot of students who wanted to play percussion. And I think that's a very common story. And I think something to mitigate that is if you can offer some sort of after school, or maybe every Friday in band class we do percussion, or every Friday in band class we all play a wind instrument, so that students can engage with instruments they want to. And then if you combine that with giving them, say, a top 3 option so that you have like a well-rounded band, but they still have the ability to engage with music in the way they might want to more. And I'll bet you eventually, once they keep doing band, they'll like the instrument they started doing anyway. So it won't be as big of an issue. But I just think it's funny because there's like this Facebook middle school band directors group that I kind of lurk in and see and there's always like, at the start of the semester, at least like 5 different teachers saying, I have 40 kids and 39 of them want to play drums. And someone suggested something like naming it mallets instead of drums so that they wouldn't even think to choose because they just want to hit things. I don't know.
That's funny. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I think there. I just thought about this. Like there's like some kind of like alternate reason why so many people want to play like a specific instrument. Maybe it's like, oh, like there's a whole friend group that was like, oh, like let's all play this instrument, like all 15 of us or something. So like maybe what you need to do is you need to give people the opportunity to play other things. So like I know with the drum line that I'm a tech for, we do a thing before like we have them audition where we let them try all of the instruments before they choose what they want to sign up for. So maybe giving the students like, okay, like you gave me what you want, that's your first choice, but like try out this stuff and just see what you think, and then maybe you'll change your mind or something. So that might be helpful.
No, for sure. And especially that they're 4th graders. I mean, you can experiment with things. It's not like they're going to play on Carnegie Hall stage, you know, at the end of the semester and they really need to get those scales warmed up. You know, it's like, so, you know, experimenting might be really very beneficial for you, for them. I mean, somebody might think, oh, saxophone's my first choice, but then start playing it and have an experience playing something else and say, well, actually, this other instrument really suits me much better for what, I mean, a 4th grader wouldn't put it that way, but you know what I mean? Like, oh, I like this better. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes we see something. For example, when I was teaching beginner band, this kid who was, you know, just, there was something about her that was just really scrappy and kind of, you know, edgy, and can't quite put it into words, but she was like trouble coming towards you, but never got in any trouble. She was that kind of a kid. And we were doing our first day and I had all the instruments in the band room out and, you know, played a little bit of each one and told them to go home and research, you know, find your favorite musician for each of these instruments and tell me why they're your favorite, kind of thing. And so this girl comes back and she says, I want to play the tuba. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's really cool. Tuba. I would never have pinned you as a tuba player, but that's awesome. And so she runs into the storage room, grabs a tuba, comes back and is sitting there. And the next thing she realizes is that she's the only tuba player. And she said, where are the other tuba players? I said, no, it's you. We only own one tuba. And she said, you mean I have to play this big thing all by myself? And I said, well, yeah, you said you wanted it. And so then she looks next to her and she's like, do you have another one of those? And it was the trombone. I said, yeah, we have other trombones. And she goes, I want that instead. So she just didn't, she knew she wanted something brassy and loud and, you know, potentially very dangerous. But she didn't want to be the only person doing it. So, so sometimes little things like that, like you see something, it's big and it's shiny and I want it. And then you have it and then you don't want it anymore. Then you don't want it anymore. So being in 4th grade and having an opportunity to play around with different instruments and having the experience to be a flutist for a day and a saxophonist for another day and a percussionist for another day. I mean, why not? Where's the rule book that says you can't do that? So yeah, I mean, be a little creative, and maybe an instrument survey is not the best method for 4th graders. Who knows? Yeah, go ahead.
So I remember when I was in 4th grade and all the 4th graders took a field trip to the high school for the to watch the 7th grade band play. And one person in each section, like one flutist, one trombone player, would each of them would play a popular song on their instrument. and we little fourth graders had to guess what song they were playing. It was so much fun. So before, like nobody really wanted to play the trombone. And then my friend Cindy, she plays the Harry Potter theme. And then everyone stood up and wanted to play the trombone. It was hysterical. And then it was like my favorite day when I was a seventh grader and I could volunteer to play like Somewhere Over the Rainbow on the flute. And it was really great because they're getting all these students involved and showcasing how like cool instruments can sound, can really appeal to students. And then they're choosing instruments that appeal to what they want to play and their vision of their own musical goals and what they want to play in the future, if that makes any sense. And I thought it was fun. Like, I'm definitely doing that. It was the best days ever. Like, it was great.
Sweet. So I've been asking you a lot of instrument questions. So I'm going to ask you a singing question for the singers in the house. And that is that typically in high school, very few male singers want to join choir. What is it that you're going to do to make sure that your male singers feel like they belong? Go ahead, Eliza.
I mean, if it's a choir based, like, I mean, I know that most guys, I know like most guys, I can tell from personal experience in high school, there were less tenors in less guys that joined choir in my school because there was a lot that felt nervous or they just felt like they were going to get made fun of or bullied by their peers, which was really sad because like there's some people that I know that are guys that wish that they have done choir, but they were just so worried about getting picked on. And it was really sad. And I remember my senior year, my choir director made a couple of the girls tenor, so they call them tenoritas. As far as like I know, maybe like provide like ample opportunities to make them feel welcome, like give them like a chance to sing solos or like make them feel good in rehearsal, like provide them like especially during warm-ups. Like I remember when I got the opportunity to be student conductor, so I was able to conduct the warm-ups. I think just maybe like allowed like invite the guys in choir to participate more. Maybe like provide like maybe like make it fun for them, make it easier for them, and have that will make them like invite them to try out more and they feel like they belong. They're allowed to be themselves. Maybe like just have like there's like an ample like opportunity to make sure like you feel like yourself. This is not like a place where you're going to get judged. It's a place where it's a warm and safe community. That's like the whole message of what music is doing for us, especially all around. And I know like most boys are not really drawn to choir because like most of them are athletics, and provide that sense of community in that extracurricular, and they will feel more at home like through time. That's how I feel with in terms of having them feel invited and more included per se.
Okay, good. Yeah, Jack, go ahead, and then Ryan.
I think something that would be a really good way to do that, because my choir teacher tried to get me to do choir and I literally was just like, I don't know. And then I didn't, but I wish I did. But if they came to me and they were like, hey, like we're doing like some like cool thing that I know, if you were giving something that's a little bit more relevant and it's like, oh, like here's like a style of music that you really like, or like we're gonna do like a rock song and we need a guy singer, like come on, like do it. Like that would be like, if you're giving them something where it's like, hey, like this is the kind of music that you like and like we need a guy's voice, like you might get people to be like, yeah, all right, I'll give it a try. Or like my friends and I, we used to sing sea shanties for fun. So like if you gave like an opportunity where it's more like, yo, like we're just gonna like have fun with this and like do some weird kinds of music, I think it might be a little bit more inviting for guys, because I think if they're just like, yeah, we're gonna like put on the choir robes and sing Bach, they might be like, I don't know. Yeah, so join the popular music ensemble.
Shameless plug number 3. Yes, go ahead, Ryan.
I agree with everything you're saying, Jack. And one, there's a YouTube channel called Men's Bathroom Choir that I think should be required watching for every single choir director of high school, because it's just a bunch of high school kids going in the bathroom and singing the Halo theme song, singing all these different like random pop songs. That's like music they like. And like, yes, they're kind of like making fun of the whole thing, but it's high school guys singing together, singing in harmony, making their own arrangements. And I think what happens there is you're decreasing like the amount of separation between a random high school guy and this idea of a formal classical choir, right? So in my head, if I was never involved in choir, I'd be like, oh, I have to sing. I've never sung before. And I have to sing music that I don't like and I don't relate to. If I can't change the I've never sang before, I'm uncomfortable, but I can change I don't relate to what they're doing. I can choose repertoire that'll draw people in. So that's one less degree of separation, one less obstacle to them feeling like they could be involved. And then my cheeky answer is just steal a couple band kids because they're already halfway there.
Nice. Steal a couple band kids. Okay, that's, I think, going to be quote of this session. Steal a couple band kids. They're already there. No, that's really good and that's really important. And so there's a couple things to think about in terms of this question, and it's going to sound, particularly problematic, but male choral teachers have an easier time of recruiting male singers for obvious reasons. When we see ourselves in our models and in our mentors, we are more likely to go towards that rather than retreat. Now, that's not to say that all male choral teachers have an abundance of male singers. I'm not suggesting that would be foolish, but they do have a little bit of an easier time than the female choral teachers in terms of recruiting male singers. The other thing that is to be, just sort of mindful of is that the male voice is changing. And so wrestling with that, the teacher needs to be incredibly sensitive. And be mindful that male students are going through that at different times and in different kinds of ways and are, going to feel differently about that. So know what to do, how to do it, and in what ways to do it. And so that's where professional development comes in handy. And if you aren't somebody who's had a changing voice, then you in particular need to be up to speed on how to address those concerns and issues. And then the other thing to think about is, okay, let's say that the males don't want to sing in choir. Can you create vocal opportunities, as you are all suggesting, that they would want to do? So like a barbershop quartet, or, something for which they would have ownership and it would be just them and for them. And then maybe you might say, I really could use your help in X number, whatever it is that you're working on. Could you do me the solid and join choir this semester, since they've been working with you as like, their advisor for a barbershop quartet or whatever it happens to be. So as you've all suggested, there are ways of managing each and every one of these scenarios. It just takes creativity, ingenuity, and a lot of caring and knowing your students and what is valuable for them. And sea shanty choirs are the way to go, apparently, and join the popular music ensemble. Yes, both of those things will solve all of your problems as future music educators. I still to this day love the fact that last year's foundations class taught me about pirate metal. I mentioned that in my grad class last week. I said, what's a thing? Like, what?
One of my friends reached out to me a few days ago, and I was like, hey, like, how you been? And we were just catching up, and he was like, yeah, I really got into pirate metal. And I was like, you what? No way.
Yes. No, it is a thing. It's a thing. And so are sea shanty choirs, apparently. All right. Well,
the loop. What is I'm out of the loop. What is pirate?
You weren't in foundations last semester. I said the same thing. I said, pirate metal? Is this a real thing? Apparently it is. It's a whole subgenre of metal music. Yes, written for and about pirates. I know. Some of it's actually kind of good. Yeah, it's very entertaining. Anyway, so then the other thing, of course, to think about in terms of interviews is your appearance. So make sure you're well groomed, well dressed. If your room that you're having the Zoom interview in is a mess, use some sort of background so that we don't, yes, there it is. Thank you, Ryan. So that we, the interviewers, do not assume that your landscape is your inner self. So you are not your room. So, you know, just be mindful of those sorts of things. Be mindful of if you are not able to answer a question, like say, I need a little bit more time to think about that. And that's totally okay. Like if there's a difficult question, you can say, can you read that again? Or can you ask that in a different way? Or I need to think about that. Can I have a couple minutes? All fine. Better to do that than to just jump in and start talking and go into Alice in Wonderland. You know, that take the time that you need to really think about the question, to understand the question, and to sort of map out a potential answer in your head as you're thinking. What other interview tips are useful? Yeah, sure, go ahead, Melanie.
What if you're thinking about your answer and then someone else is talking and they say it before you, and then you have nothing left to say?
I have nothing left to say. No, that's a really important point. And so if somebody does take your answer, so let's say, you know, with the question that I just asked about the choir, and somebody said, you know, oh, well, you know, you should, if you program music that's relevant to the singers, then they'll be more likely to join. And if you were going to say that exact thing, you can say, you know, I completely agree with Jack that we should be, you know, mindful of our students' wants and needs and what they value, for example. And so then you can then provide a concrete example for what was just said. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it would further elaborate what you already believe to be true and what was already stated, but you would be then providing more fuel and food and discussion. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions about, yeah, sure, Ryan, go ahead.
So since we're interviewing in groups, is it going to kind of be like this format where you ask a question and then we jump in one by one?
Pretty much, yeah. But it'll be smaller. So the most that you would have in your group is an additional 2 people. So it'll be you and 2 other music education students, myself, Dr. DiLorenzo, and I think Dr. Goldstein will be joining us. But I'm not sure about the dual cert people, you know, because we're just figuring out what we're doing. But the single cert people, that's for sure. It'll be myself, Dr. DiLorenzo, and Dr. Goldstein, and then you and 2 other music education students. And we'll ask a question, and you can feel free to just either raise your hand or to unmute yourself and start the conversation going. And then as people kind of feel their way in and out of the conversation, it will just hopefully evolve in a natural kind of way. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
This is a dual cert specific question. So for that interview, are they going to like ask questions and then we have to use the article as evidence to support our answer, or like are the questions like reading comprehension sort of, or is like the article just like a catalyst for like a discussion that we just had now?
Right. So I don't know about the way the article will be used when you're talking to the education faculty, and Nick can probably tell you about that. I know that for myself, I don't even know what article you were reading. So I won't reference it. I won't talk about it. I will not bring it up. If you want to bring it up, feel free. But I won't really know what you'll be referring And, if you say, like, if a question is, particularly speaks towards an issue that you read about, feel free to say, oh, in the reading for, blah, 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 they said yada, yada, yada. And that makes me think about X, Y, and Z. So feel free to reference it, but we will not be referring to it in the music interview for the dual cert people.
Can I jump on that real quick?
Sure.
So for your question, Amanda, about referring to the article, they will want you to refer back to it. For me, when I went into it, there's 2 or 3 questions that are posted. It was posted on the board. And they're like, okay, as a group, we're going to pick what question we want to discuss. And then from that question, you're going to make an answer referring back to the article. Okay. And then they'll go down the line like that.
So I hate to provide a workshop or a mock interview session and run, but I'm a minute late for my private lesson, so I have to go. I am sorry. It was very nice seeing all of you. If you have any questions and you just were like, via Zoom, you can email me. I'll be happy to address any of your interview questions via email, or we can set up another time to talk and to chat. But for now,
Thank you, Silverman.
I have to go. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.